It can be hard to find fresh greens in Ketchikan. The owners of Ketchikan Ever Greens are working hard to change that. On this episode of Makers, we chat with local entrepreneurs Jessica and Jeff Jans.
And we came up with this idea in the fall of 2020 and quickly made the decision, and circumstances were there for us to make that choice to move forward. And we purchased the first container and the first equipment that runs our operation in October of 2020, and then committed to move up here. We're here by March 1st of 2021 and landed that container that we had purchased in May of 2021. So we're just over a year now into this.
What was the process of getting it up here like?
Well, it's thankfully shipping containers are things that people are used to moving around the country and moving to Ketchikan, so we just had to find somebody to do it at a reasonable price, which is then where the challenge is, and wasn't actually that difficult the first time. The second time around, as we all know, is the supply chain woes of America had come into effect, and we were seeing almost double the cost and timing challenges. And we also had our second container arrive damaged too. So there was, not everything can ship in a shipping container. Not everything ships well in a shipping container potentially. So,
but we should add that it is repaired. It took a few months, but yeah.
Right, and we landed it on site about a week before all the snow began, and didn't really
here in
stop
Ketchikan.
Here in Ketchikan.
Yeah,
so
that's
it
right.
Very well could have, since we grow up on Cambria, and that's a very steep hill in Ketchikan, it could have stayed in storage at the AML shipyard for a very long time, possibly almost until mid-February, had it not gotten there and in position. So we got lucky there. But yeah, the logistics were, just the container alone is one thing, but then it's all the supplies that support it, and coordinating all that and storing it elsewhere. When you're an entrepreneur and you have money invested, and as the saying goes, time is money, you are ready to and excited and ready to jump into it and get it started. So that's what we did, and very quickly we were growing. I think, as we said, about 8 or 2 weeks after it landed, and then harvested about 8 weeks.
When we were working through our feasibility study for this business and bringing it to Ketchikan, we figured that we could supply with our the one farm, right? 3% of the lettuce for this community. And we figured, well, that's a no-brainer, right? We could get at least 3% of the town to buy this lettuce.
What was opening the door for the first time like?
Oh, well, yeah, shocking. We had no idea what to expect, but also it looked like a lot of work. We had all the panels that the lettuce grows on, they were all in boxes, and we just quickly started unloading, and it was emotional a bit, just to be facing the reality of our future, and it was finally going to begin, and yeah, it was a great moment.
Yeah, it had been a lot of paperwork and thought and theory, and there is that moment, I guess, when the door opened, when you're saying, okay, this is my new job and career. Now I guess, anointed myself a farmer and planning to do this professionally, and that is a sobering thought at times, and remains that way sometimes.
Yeah.
So this is a wasabina mustard, a spicy mustard. It gets really spicy as we cut through its life cycle. So these plants here, we get about 6 or 7 cuttings on them, sometimes more, before we'll be harvested. And so we're always planting with that in mind, and having a new generation come up as we're getting towards the end of the cycle of another plant. So these are going to the New York Cafe. Their flavor profile really changes when you cook them. And while when you eat some of these raw, it's almost like eating a bit of Chinese mustard. Gives you that nose heat. When you cook them, that heat goes away, but it really has quite a distinct and delicious flavor in food. So we just go around and we're trying to cut the most mature leaves and then leave essentially little solar panels on to continue to grow. So we don't want to take too much off at any time. But then if we don't cut enough, it gets quite large. And all this here was trimmed down almost to 1 or 2 leaves last week, and then it regenerates. So.
And the same with this too. This is huge for 1 week's growth.
Right. So give you a look in the camera. This is a Mizuna leaf here. So this is the name of the leaf is Red Kingdom, but this is an Asian green. Really, really pretty on both sides. Nice, deep red, purple color.
And Asian greens grow really well here in the farm. So we've tried a bunch of different things, and things that grow well would be the Asian greens, and kale grows really well.
Yeah.
So we just are always experimenting with new things.
Yeah. For example, dill, salmon season coming into effect, people have fresh salmon, and so we're growing fresh dill. This isn't ready to cut yet. We're going to let it probably fill out another week or two before we start to cut on it. It's taken time for us to learn how to do this properly, where we make the cut, but we're not harming any of the leaves, because these will grow, and we'll be eating these leaves next week.
I'm really good at it. Just still learning.
So this is a 40-foot shipping container that's been converted to grow leafy greens, lettuce, a whole variety of herbs, and it's been built in a way that takes most advantage of the space. So behind me you can see the walls move back and forth in order to allow room for harvesting. The life cycle of the plants is kind of an interesting discussion point here, and what we have to my right is a nursery table. The nursery table is where the plants start their life. So we have trays that we use to add little cocoa cord and peat moss plugs. This is just a little guy with little roots just starting here. And we'll place them in the tray, and then we'll add seeds into those plugs. We'll cover them with a humidity dome here, which will help the seed germinate. And then about a week later, we'll remove the humidity dome, and we'll have little seedlings popping up. And then they'll spend about 3 or 4 weeks in here, depending on the variety, before they get transplanted into the cultivation area. Okay, so then the cultivation area is where plants are gonna live from about 3 to 4 weeks of age all the way until we harvest, which is around 7 or 8 weeks. And inside of these panels here, which hang vertically on the walls, as you can see, they have little hooks in the back that we can hang them on. And you can see up here at the top are little wicking strips, is what we call them, and they basically run the length of the channel. You can see them in here. So the foam is what helps the plug seat and set and hang on the wall, and the wicking strip is what delivers water to the plants. And in hydroponics, the water acts like soil, and it's also delivering nutrients to the plants. And there's little drip emitters that connect to the wicking strips, and they're delivering water at about a 2 gallon an hour rate. And we run the pumps while the lights are on, and the lights are on for about 18 hours a day, and 5 minutes of run time while we're watering, and then about a 45-minute break where the pumps are off. And that cycle repeats over and over through what we call the day cycle. And in here, most of the time, day is night. We like to run the lights while we're asleep so that during this time of day, we can be in here and working and taking care of the plants while the lights are off. Just technically they're nighttime. And it's very hard to work in here with the lights on. They're quite bright. You know, we're replacing the sun essentially for these plants, so it's not a place we want to spend a lot of time in. We have special glasses we wear that help cut out those red and blue light intensities that we are growing with. So lighting, and LED lighting in particular, is probably the biggest innovation that you're seeing in this controlled environment agricultural space. And it's just the efficiency of the LEDs, bringing the cost down to run the types of intensities and spectrums of light that you'd want to use to mature the plants faster, get better coloring, better flavors. And in a confined space like this, we like to use red and blue spectrum light. These are the spectrums that the plants are going to utilize the most. In fact, the reason a lot of plants look green to you is because they're reflecting green light off of their leaves, which means they're not absorbing green light in the spectrum. Red and blue light are light spectrums that plants readily absorb, so we can focus quite specifically on the light that the plants utilize the most. We use less energy to get them what they need. So these are our youngest seedlings in the cultivation area. They're gonna live here until they fully mature and we harvest them. But they've been on the wall for about a week. So in that nursery area where they were living last week, they were at their full maturity, and in the capacity of that seedling tray, they were ready to then be spaced out again and transplanted here. We are growing right now little green sweet crisps and red romaines that we call green. And they're quite small, but you'll see we have on each of these walls, chronologically, we have lettuce that we had transplanted up to 4 weeks ago, and you can see that in its full maturity, ready to harvest tomorrow, and it will be on your dinner plate by Thursday. So with these plant panels, one of the nice things about them is we can plant them at any density we like, based on what we estimate to be the size of the head of lettuce when it's ready to mature. So depending on how long they spend in the walls, or the type of lettuce that it is, and what its sort of growth pattern is, we'll make decisions on how dense to plant these. And so these crops here, this sweet crisp, has one more night of growth, and then we are going to harvest it. And harvesting for us is quite simple. We just really reach our hands in here, and let's see, we can pull out a head. So you can see what we have here is basically lots of little leaves. This lettuce is bred to grow lots of little leaves. And then we can just make one cut. We'll get rid of a little bit of the early growth on the bottom, and then we'll make a cut and off to a home near you. A lot of it is getting people to fall in love with food again in a way that they don't necessarily or haven't had the opportunity to do that before. If you've lived here long enough, there's just certain things at the store you just never buy because you have such a low success rate with it coming home. When we were doing the farmer's market, they said, "What voodoo black magic are you putting in?" I've never had anything last for 2 weeks in the fridge. Like, it's just no supply chain.